Hello again. I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. And today I want to unlock a listener review and some entrepreneurship tips as we actually hit our 5th month on air with Unlocking the Club during November, which is National Entrepreneurship Month. So recently we received the following review on Apple Podcasts. The title of the review was A Space of Wisdom, Inspiration, and Love. And the review went on to say, these episodes resonate with me as a mother of Black and Japanese girls and a DEI practitioner. I love how the host facilitates each episode very thoughtfully and brings out the light in each guest. So first and foremost, thank you, YTT-san, for such a thoughtful review. I love hearing that my conversations here on Unlocking the Club are resonating with you and with listeners who are raising the next generation of leaders. I love hearing that listeners who are doing important work, such as the work that you're doing in the DEI space, are connecting to the content and the conversation and the discourse that's taking place on these episodes. And I love hearing that those who identify as Black women and those who are committed to being allies and accomplices to Black women, or those who identify as Black and female, are enjoying the show for a myriad of different reasons. So thank you for sharing that review. That review, along with the other reviews that we've received on Apple Podcasts or the other podcast platforms, are really meaningful to me for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, I realize that so much of the value that any of us bring isn't just what we intend our value to be, but most importantly, it is how others receive us and our work. And so to know that people are receiving value that is in alignment with how I intended the show to inspire, to be cathartic, to inform, and to connect is really incredibly meaningful to me. It's also really rewarding to receive such amazing validation from listeners via reviews and emails and social media posts and text messages and on and on and on. I got to tell you, I eat all of it up, not because it's patting me on the back, but because the mission for Unlocking the Club was to be an inspiration. It was to make sure that we were unlocking powerful voices and stories from unique perspectives, particularly through the prism of Black women, or those issues that face Black women quite frequently, like our episode on uterine fibroid embolization that we had Dr. Lippman and Teresa Edwards join us a couple months ago. So I want you to know, and I talked about this on a recent episode, that I'm going to do a much better job of receiving the support and the outreach. And I'm inspired to continue to share these powerful stories and unique voices with you through our conversations during the podcast and the other content that we will be releasing as well. And I continue to encourage all listeners to take a moment to leave a review, not only because it's good for the podcast and we appreciate the positive feedback, but I know when I'm thinking about a new podcast, I oftentimes take a look at the podcast reviews to determine if that is going to be a podcast that I may be interested in. So by leaving a review and sharing what it was that resonated with you or that you enjoy about the podcast may enlighten someone else who is looking for the right message. And so thank you in advance for leaving those reviews. I encourage you to continue doing so. But also know that your reviews and your feedback via email and social media truly does help my team and I continue to try to inspire and endeavor to deliver the content that you all want. The guests that you'd be interested in hearing from, the topics that are important to you or that you may not have access to information. And so please, again, continue to give us feedback, to share, to follow us on social media, to join us on our Facebook group, the Code Breakers Lounge, as we continue these conversations. And as I was reading that review earlier today, trying to decide what I was going to talk about on today's show, it popped up on my calendar that today is actually, or this month is National Entrepreneurship Month. And as I had mentioned from time to time on this show, I have finally taken the time to assess my entrepreneurial journey, which began inauspiciously as I completed my MBA at NYU Stern School of Business. There were 2 class projects that really unlocked all of these ideas I had in my head. but had no outlet for them. And I actually thought I was risk averse, right? I had grown up aspiring to work in the corporate landscape, to get a safe job, to make sure I had a steady paycheck and a steady income to be able to pay the bills and benefits. And it was in those two classes that I had at NYU, one where we came up with a shoe boomers for the boomerang generation of folks that were kind of baby boomers and were looking for some stylish footwear, but not quite as stylish as the young folks were wearing at that time. And then another one was a collaboration between media and entertainment. But that was kind of the inspiration that unlocked the fact that I was creative in a way that I didn't think I was before. A few classmates and a good friend of mine, Beverly Oden, who was on one of the earlier episodes of Unlocking the Club, we actually went on to enter the NYU Social Venture Business Plan competition and won $50,000 to start up the Chance Foundation. And that, again, continued to tap into that entrepreneurial spirit. And so every now and then I'll check out this file cabinet that I had from that period of time in the late 90s and early 2000s, which I'm dating myself a little bit. But I had all of these business plans. I think all of you may remember those online programs that you had on a CD or DVD that you could create business plans. Well, I had so many business plans that I came up with. And one of those was actually this idea of bringing a WNBA team to the Bay Area. I actually had an organizational chart, some financials drawn up, potential team names, and more. And now there is a rumor going around that the Bay Area may actually get a WNBA team in the near future, which is really amazing for me to see. And as I step back and think about those days in, again, late 1990s, early 2000s, when I tapped into that entrepreneurial spirit, all of that led me to starting my first solopreneur venture called Network Sports Consulting. And the business is still active, but experienced a really rocky road out of the gate. So here's a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you all in honor of National Entrepreneurship Month. If you are thinking about starting your own business venture, first and foremost, trust yourself, right? Trust yourself. I think so often we hesitate and because fear is showing up or because we're not quite sure how to do something, we're not sure if we can trust ourselves to go out and do something. But if you just start, it doesn't have to be perfect, as Shantara Hardy said in a previous episode where she said perfection is expensive. Trust yourself and just get going. It doesn't have to be a huge endeavor. Just take one step in that direction and see what happens. The other thing that I want to share with you is just to know your value. And when you know your value, what you're bringing to the table, your expertise, whether it's a product or a service, then you're more likely to set your fees and your prices accordingly. And for many of us that have been entrepreneurs, those first couple of engagements that you had, you probably undervalued yourself and set your fees much lower than the amount of work that you were doing. And I've learned from that. Some of my smallest clients who were paying me the least amount of money were the biggest headaches. So know your value. Ask others about your value. Ask others about how much they're charging and the value that they're bringing. The next thing is to ask for help early and often, because you're going to need help before you think you need help. And this was a big hang up for me, is I didn't want people to think that I wasn't capable. So I refused to ask for help early enough. And now I am really open to sending someone a text and asking them if they'll give me a heads up about something, or if they have a template or a sample or a tip that I could use before I try to go down the road and figuring it out on my own and waste a lot of time. And then the last few things, first is start with doing one thing really well. You can't do all the things, so do one thing really well. If you have one product, if you have one service, do that really well and get proof of concept. And remember that great ideas with poor execution is not a winning formula. There's a lot of good ideas out there, and there's a lot of okay ideas that actually the entrepreneur is a phenomenal executor. Execution matters. So great ideas with poor execution is not a winning formula. Make sure you're taking the time and remember that the devil is in the details. And then the last thing is entrepreneurship is not for everyone, but if it's for you, it truly is rewarding. And I am excited today to be in conversation with another amazing entrepreneur who is having a tremendous impact in so many different communities that she serves through the work that she's doing. And so our guest today on Unlocking the Club is Felicia Hall Allen.
Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
Today on Unlocking the Club, I'll be joined by Felicia Hall Allen. Felicia is the CEO of Felicia Hall Allen and Associates, a consulting firm that specializes in leadership, team building, organizational development, executive coaching, and sports management. Felicia is also the co-founder of a Step Up Inc., a professional development symposium. Felicia is a former manager for Nike's women's basketball sports marketing department and a team executive for the WNBA's Charlotte Sting, where in her second season, the Sting won the WNBA's Eastern Conference Championship and competed for the WNBA Championship. Recognized as a national and local community leader, Felicia has received several recognitions, including being awarded the Maya Angelou Women Who Lead Award presented by UNCF, and she was also recognized as a 2022 recipient of the Career Mastered Women's Month Leadership in Action Award, the Rising Coaches DEI Impact Award, and has been acknowledged as one of Core Magazine's 100 Most Influential Blacks Today. An advocate for equity in sports, Felicia is a founding member of the Advancement of Blacks in Sports. She is also a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc., Omega Tau Omega's chapter, and the Crown Jewels chapter of the Links Incorporated. Thanks for tuning in as we unlock the club with Felicia Hall Allen. Felicia, it is wonderful to see you. How are you doing?
I am exceptionally well today, Angela, and it is great to see you.
I first and foremost am honored that you said yes to being a guest on this podcast, because I have long been a huge fan of yours and so appreciative of the road that you have been on to have an impact, particularly in the space for Black women and Black women in sports. So I want to thank you for all the work that you have been doing and that you continue to do. And I really think it's important for our listeners to know, I just read your bio, but what else is there that they should know about Felicia Hall Allen?
When you were reading my bio, I was sitting thinking, glory to God. That was the thought that came to my mind, like, glory to God. I think that the thing that my bio probably won't say is that I come from a line of women who believe in elevating others and elevating dreams. I come from a line of women who believe in the things that have not yet been seen, and that I come from a line of women who prayed me into the position that I sit in today.
Whew, I'm gonna take that in for a little bit, because there was a lot that you just said there. And one is a line of women who think about the things that have not been seen yet. And how has that informed your journey?
I think that my grandmother has had an incredible impact on me. We were tennis fans when we didn't have access to a tennis court. My brother and I would take a piece of chalk and draw the tennis court on my grandparents' driveway, and my grandmother was the judge, and we would use a flip-flop and a tennis ball and play tennis. Wow. I remember listening to the Atlanta Braves games on the radio, sitting on her front porch. She's drinking an RC Cola. I remember watching when HBO first came out, Muhammad Ali boxing, and how much she loved Sugar Ray Leonard. I was born a Dallas Cowboy. Okay, I'm not a fan. I was born a Dallas Cowboy. And I think about how much she was into Olympics. and how we watched gymnastics. And my grandmother was such an untraditional person for her generation. And she passed on a love of sports to me. And I think that it was that craving to win. We don't ever just play to play. We play to win. And that was kind of like my grandmother's mindset. So I didn't grow up as one of those girls who just wanted a participation trophy. I wanted the blue ribbon. And I'm grateful that even in elementary school, I was kind of like, she made these sort of deposits in me that said that, just showing up isn't enough. If you're going to show up, then you better step up, stand up, be seen, heard, and recognized. And if you're not the best, cheer for those who are until it's your turn. So great role modeling for me from a woman with an 8th grade education, but with the passion and the heart of a lion who will protect her cubs at all costs.
That's somebody I would love to have known, right? And I listened to you talk about your grandmother, someone with an 8th grade education who instilled all of these values in you. And I wonder at what stage in your journey did you realize the impact that she had, given the circumstances that she had navigated?
That's a great question. First, I need to speak her name. I like that when Oprah had that huge celebration, and I don't remember if it was Pearl Cleage or Nikki Giovanni, but they said we should speak the name. So Marie Jones Williams is the name. And I think the first time that I probably understood it was when I left to go to college. And I was a little nervous about leaving Louisiana, an environment that I grew up in where everybody looked like me, not all tall, cute with big feet, but you understand. So I leave that environment and go to an environment where only 3% of the people look like me. And I think that one of the things that I began to understand was that what I look like doesn't define who I can and will become. I think that I understood that it was the spirit in me. My grandmother was a very spiritual person, and her spirit led first. And so before you met her, you encountered her spirit. And I think that when I got to college, that was one of the things that I learned. I was not the most talented player on our basketball team. I got to play for Hall of Fame coach C. Vivian Stringer at the University of Iowa. My freshman year, I played with Michelle Edwards, who was National Player of the Year. And I was probably, if there were 15 people on the team, I was number 15 coming off the bench.
I can relate
But
to that.
I probably was the best cheerleader that our team had ever seen. And I felt proud. A proud moment for me was by the time I graduated, I remember there was an article in the paper that referred to me as the heart and soul of the team. And at this time, I'm a captain, I'm a starter. I helped recruit the #1 class in the nation that came to the University of Iowa, multiple Big Ten championships. And I think that I went from being number 15 on the bench as a freshman to starting as a sophomore. And Coach Stringer said at the exit meeting at the end of my freshman year, I said verbally, I believe in putting things into the atmosphere. Again, I can't see it, but I'm believing it. I'm believing in it. I'm believing for it. And I said, I'm going to start next year. She said, when I left the office, she and Coach Freeman, she said they were like, did you hear what Phoebe said? That is crazy. She's starting next year. And she said that she was just proud of the fact that I went from just speaking words to owning those words and being the person who would jump the ball and set the tone for the team. So that's what I mean when I said, I think that I understood what my grandmother gave me when I understood the impact that my spirit and my attitude and my disposition had and being able to consume and own the space that I find myself in.
I love that story, and it resonates with me for so many different reasons. And I think I told the story on a recent podcast. I was listening to actually another podcast where Tara Vanderveer, my coach at Stanford, was a guest, and the host had asked a question just about people understanding their roles and how do you keep people motivated that aren't contributing on the court. And she told the story without naming names. And she's like, well, one year we had this player who didn't see the light of day. She sat closer to the Gatorade cooler than she sat to the coaches on the bench. And, we did this exercise once and we asked, like, what is your role? And she wrote on this card, to bring sunshine. And I've heard her tell this story a number of times, and that certainly was me, a walk-on at Stanford who played 41 minutes in a 33 game season. So that was 1 minute and 7 seconds a game, if anybody's but you're right, it's your spirit that comes from our ancestors is infused and embedded in who we are and how we choose to show up under a variety of different circumstances. And it doesn't miss me, Felicia, that you went from a strong household with Marie Jones Williams to a strong situation in the middle of nowhere in Iowa with Coach C. Vivian Stringer. What was that connection? Did you know that you needed a strong Black woman in your life when you went away to college?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anthony Hamilton has that song, Coming Where I'm From. I knew what I needed. And most of the other students who came from where I'm from went to HBCUs. I had been an Upward Bound student at Southern University in Shreveport. And so I grew up dreaming of wanting to go to an HBCU. When I got kind of good in basketball, I was like, dang, I'm probably not going to go to an HBCU. But the next best thing, and it was because I really wanted an opportunity to pursue a national championship. And for one reason or another, HBCUs just didn't get the resources and still don't have access to the resources. And I think that what Jackson State is doing has kind of elevated the game for the HBCU community, and Jackie McWilliams at the CIAA and Division II conference. But what they have done rivals what the ACC does, and both corporate offices are headquartered here in Charlotte now. But I think that having Coach Stringer and my grandmother, what they did for me, my grandmother believed in the beauty of dreams and nurturing the dream. And what Coach Stringer did was elevate my dream. She gave me access to it. My grandmother helped to instill it. Coach Stringer was the person who was able to provide the sun. She gave me that additional sunshine, the boost, the water, the nurturing, the access to the sort of nutrients and people and networks that I was going to need in order for me to be able to flourish. And I think that from the moment that I sat down and had a conversation with her, all of the recruiting visits that I went on, at the time, Angela, we got 5 official visits. And in the conversation with Coach Stringer, if you were sitting in front of her, you knew you could play basketball, and so did she. But she didn't talk to me about the kind of basketball player she wanted me to be. She talked to me about the kind of woman and the kind of women she wanted to have a part of her program. And we talked more about my dream and who I would become as a woman than we did as who I would become as a basketball player at the University of Iowa. And that fed my soul. I was crying, like tears were running down my face, because I felt like I had finally met a coach who saw me and who was willing to meet me where I was, and who was willing to buy in and believe in the dream and help me get to where I wanted to go. And I mean, she exceeded every expectation and or hope that I could have had for a coach.
Yeah, when I hear you talk about this dream, and it was a dream that your grandmother instilled in you and a dream that Coach Stringer nurtured, but how did you have the audacity to even think you could dream?
Oh, the audacity. You made me think of President Barack Obama, the audacity of hope. I think that really it has to be God. Because we say that everybody has a purpose, right? And I attend Elevation Church now, and the mission is see what God can do through you. And I think that the dream, I don't think that it was a bold, audacious, scary sort of dream. I think that it was as small as, I wonder what God can do through me in the space where he chooses to plant me. And I think that my prayer for a long time, Angela, was, God, send me where you want me to go, or keep me where you'd have me to stay. I just wanted to bloom in whatever environment I was going to be placed in. And so I grew up in a tough environment where most people don't want to come from where I'm from. But I think that it is because of that environment that I had the fortitude and the resilience to unlock the purpose that was in me. And because I dreamed, I was able and have been able to expose my family to the kind of experiences that I would hope it made every sacrifice they made for me worth it.
Well, and you speak of coming from an environment that was tough on you, but it fortified you and prepared you to thrive, not just to survive, but to thrive in corporate America, right? You got your law degree while you're at the University of Iowa, and you went into a space that was very similar to probably the spaces you were navigating on campus at Iowa, but not back in Louisiana. And I wonder how easy, simple, normal was that, or how challenging was that journey in corporate America as a Black woman with 2 degrees, with a strong Black woman as your grandmother setting you on your way, a strong Black woman in Coach Stringer nurturing your dreams, but corporate America?
Mm-hmm. I recently heard on the radio, it's election season right now.
Yeah.
And this group called Black Voters Matter, they have a slogan, don't black down. And I think that what I was able to gain going into kind of like law school as well as into corporate America, I think I've just had a mentality, I'm not going to black down. I'm going to stand up for everything that I believe is right. And I'm not going to be afraid to use my voice. And I'm going to speak for others who don't have the capacity to speak. When I was in 10th grade, like my civics teacher said to me, Hall, you always speaking up when that doesn't have anything to do with you. You don't talk that much and take up for folks, you might as well get paid for it. And I never forgot that. And now I get paid to take up for other people as a sports agent. I get paid to motivate and inspire and elevate other people as a motivational speaker, as a leadership development and team building consultant. And when I graduated from law school, that same civics teacher taught my mother and my father. Wow. She had her husband to drive her 21 hours from Shreveport to my law school graduation. When I got married, that same teacher, I think she was like a little over 80 at that time, showed up at my wedding. She left her birthday party to come to the reception. And she said it was because she saw something in me then that said that I would not basically black down, that I would be who I was supposed to be, and that I would be intentional about bringing other people along the way and making sure they had access to what they deserved or what should have been rightfully theirs. And that, I think that those sort of seeds being sown, I've been fortunate enough to have people to see other stuff in me, like a kindergarten teacher or a first or third grade teacher, a high school basketball coach who said I couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. But because I hate to lose, I'm willing to work for what I want. And I just don't believe in playing small, smaller than you should be or you're capable of being. And so I'm tall. If I was standing, you would see all the long legs. Like God's gift to me was my voice and these legs and arms, because they helped me get the free education, right? And the voice helped me kind of along the way. But I think that what I got from all of those women, I think, was this idea of being persistent and resilient and kind of pushing through. The only way you can unlock anything is you have to be willing to take a risk. You gotta be willing to bet on yourself.
Full stop. Full stop right there. Well, and Felicia, you and I have a mutual friend Renee Brown, who on an episode a month or so ago talked about how others try to steal your shine. And I hear you when you say that you refuse to play small. Was there an instance where someone overtly or covertly tried to encourage you to play small and was trying to steal your shine?
Absolutely. I think two different situations. One in a room full of men, and another in a room full of women who didn't look like me. The room full of men, when I was working for Nike, and I was manager of our women's sports marketing department. And let's say there were 8 people in the room, 7 men, and I was the only woman. And my responsibility was to speak up on behalf of little girls, teenagers, and women who engaged in sports and played basketball. So I had to be the voice. The guys could say anything. They could use any sort of language. Their voices could be raised at any levels. And there was no, and it was perceived as passion. It was perceived as confidence. They knew their stuff. But if I ventured to be a little too curious and or inquisitive of the person who was sitting in front of us, and if I leaned in, or if my voice elevated, when we walked away, I was the bee in the room. Now, I wasn't nearly as authoritative in my tone and or delivery as some of the guys were. But it was interesting to me that even women would attempt to perceive me in that way. She's tough. She's this. It was almost as if the things that I had been taught to be, that they had become like a black eye, or like the things that they used to.
All your strengths they were using against you.
But for the guys, that was respect. Right. I think that happened in that room. And then when I was in a room with women who had perceived power, and I just noticed how maybe I was one of the younger people in the room. And when I would make a comment and or have something to say, it was almost as if it was washed over. But when they had something to say, oftentimes, and sometimes they were repeating what I had just said. It was almost like every Susan and Kathy, all of a sudden, what a great idea, and just co-signing on it, to the point that I remember one person, it was Debbie Antonelli, leaned over to me. People may know Debbie because she does sports broadcasting for ESPN, Fox, a number of other people. She leaned over to me and she said, "Isn't that what you just said?" As if, and what was good for me was I felt it, but it was validated. It was confirmed. You know what I think is happening is happening. So a lot of times we think that because we look alike, if I'm in a room and everybody looks like me, whether it's all Black people or whether it's all women, we tend to think that everybody who's Black is on my team, or everybody who's a woman is on my team, and everybody who's not Black is on the opposing team, and everybody who's not a woman is on, the competitive team. I've not found it to be that way. I think Coach Stringer probably helped me to understand that it's not what people look like, it's how they treat you.
Yeah, how they show up.
It's how they show up. And I think that what I've learned is that the people who show up for you are the people who will ride for you. And what I mean by ride for you, they're the ones who will partner, collaborate, and sponsor you to help create opportunities for you to continue to grow, to be challenged, but also to gain access to opportunities that might not be available for you or to you.
Yeah, yeah. I think so often on the show, what many of our guests say is, when I win, you win, we win. And that's a mentality, but it's not a mentality that's possessed by everybody. And the sooner you recognize that, the better off you will be. Because I went into the corporate landscape thinking that everyone was on the same team, and that, right, the same challenges that I was having as a woman in the workplace, other women in the workplace saw, noticed it, and we were on the same team. And that was not the case. And I think the first time that I actually heard that this wasn't just my experience, I thought, okay, this is just about me, was, and you were probably part of this, was the first Inspiring Women luncheon that we had in New York City, where Madeleine Albright was the special guest. And I just remember when an audience member asked her who some of her mentors were. And she made a point in her witty sense of humor to say, so often people assume that it was other women, but oftentimes other women got in the way, right? Were intimidated by her, tried to prevent her from having opportunities. And it was men that actually you may not have had a connection with or didn't identify with, that were the ones that were pulling you up, right? And giving you opportunities. And I think we have to change this. And what Debbie did in that moment, in that motion, was really important, to validate you, to let you know that you're not alone, that it is seen. And what we need to do to take that next step is to make sure people say, wait a minute, Felicia said that 25 minutes ago, let's hear her out. We need to show up for ourselves and for our colleagues in the way that is different than we've seen in the past.
Amen, amen, and amen. And I have to give Debbie credit. She did say that. Felicia said that. Maybe we didn't hear her. Felicia, what was that you said again? She absolutely did that, which said, I hear you, but I also see you. And I think that as women, we have to do a better job of that. You mentioned She Wins, You Win. That was one of my favorite books by Gail Evans. And when I thought about the whole basketball thing, Angela, I'll be honest and say it made me think about when Carolyn Peck gave Dawn Staley a piece of her championship, the net. And then Dawn said she gave it to Dawn because she thought that Dawn had the potential and our capacity to be maybe the next woman of color to win a national championship in basketball. Well, when Dawn won her championship, she said she couldn't think of one person to give it to. So she cut it up and she sent a piece to every Black female head coach at the Division I level, which for me elevated the thought. Carolyn's thought was like, I win, you win. She wins, you win. Dawn's thought was, I win, we win. Or she wins, we win. She made it more of a collective so that there didn't just have to be one winner or one person to be elevated. And I think if we can start to sort of understand that when you unlock the club, I'm not just going to sneak one person in. I'm going to open the door so wide that it's almost like the parting of the Red Sea. And we just start calling everybody, come on, y'all, like it's a reunion, let's go, let's go get it. And I love that Dawn was so intentional about that. But I also love the fact that Carolyn was the one who initiated and sowed the thought that could then grow to something much bigger than the original intent.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful gesture on both of their parts, right? In that moment where there's 150,000 things on your mind, but in that moment, they both thought of who's next. Mm-hmm. And if you have not read the article on the gesture that Dawn Staley made a few years ago when she won her first national championship with South Carolina, we'll have the article in our show notes. It's an amazing article, the gesture in and of itself, but the response from the coaches around the country who received this package from Dawn and how much it meant to them, not just to see her cutting down the nets, but that in her moment of glory, that she also was thinking of them. And I think that's such an important piece of who we are, is who your grandmother was, right? And making sure that when she sent you off to Iowa, that you would continue to advocate for others in everything that you do. And that's not always the case. When you talk about unlocking the club, I think that so often, and tell me if this is your experience, I think oftentimes people arrive at the front door of that club, they get in the club, and they let the door close behind them. They are just so happy to get into the club. But what I'm realizing through these conversations we're having on this podcast is we have agency. We have our own agency. We don't have to pound on that door to get in somebody else's club, but Dawn just did. She started her own club. Mm-hmm. She started her own club that people saw themselves in the mirrors. People saw their own potential. She encouraged them to show up and to believe and to dream.
I like that, Angela, the notion of unlocking the club, providing access, and what Dawn did. Dawn is one of my absolute favorites. Go back to Nike days. And then when I was running the WNBA team in Charlotte, she was our starting point guard. And Johnny and I do team building with her women's basketball team now. And she's been just great at elevating us and our business. But I also just thought about the notion of kind of what we have the ability to do when we support each other and when we're there for each other. In 2014, I think I had won an award at the Final Four in Nashville from the sort of Black Coaches Association group, like a Women of Impact award that they had created. And I felt like, oh man, if I'm of impact, then what am I doing to provide and create impact? It was like, I need to do more for other women. I'm a part of the Links, and I'm a part of the sorority. The Links Incorporated is an organization where there are professional women who are connected, I think linked in friendship, connected in service. Like there are over 300 chapters around the world. And then I'm also a member of Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and we have over 300,000 members. And, you know, I'll tell you just kind of like pride moments. That apparently I'm a joiner of women's groups that believe in, you know, education and civic engagement and intercultural sort of activities and being of service to others. But the big part is the sisterhood piece, the sister piece, the friend piece. And so I invited about 20 women to my home in Rock Hill, all head coaches in women's basketball, current and or a couple of them were former head coaches. And Dawn was one of the coaches who came. But when I tell you that it was just an incredible conversation where we could create a genuine, trusting environment where they had an opportunity to share their triumphs, their failures, when they were lonely, but also when they felt like they were at their best, and to be able to kind of share with each other, all with the mindset was that when we leave here, we're going to subscribe to the notion that all of us can win. And we want to make sure that we not just keep our jobs, but we want to help other people get this job as well. And so when Dawn won that championship, and then Adia was in the Final Four, and Adia competed in a championship against your alma mater, Stanford, it sent a message. It unlocked the door to the club of the head coach's position for women of color. And I think that that's what unlocking the club looks like. And I think that that is really important to me, because in sports, they didn't have that. We're taught to compete, right? But it's amazing how, like in the social and civic communities, we commingle and we play nice and friendly with each other very, very well. And I wanted to bring that, a piece of that, or some of that, to the sports world. And we've been going strong. We've been hosting retreats every year. Every other year, we host a retreat. The pandemic made us even closer. And I'm really proud to say that this past year, Nikki Fargas is the president of our executive committee. Nikki was at LSU as the head coach, now president of the Las Vegas Aces, who won the WNBA championship. But Nikki hosted the group in Vegas this summer. And I'm so proud. That's a proud thing for me, because I hope that that's something that the sisterhood that exists is something that will outlive me.
Legacy. That's legacy work there. And I want to unpack more of that. But before we get to that, I'm just curious, Felicia, what was it about that little girl that was growing up in Louisiana that was advocating for everybody else that is still committed to that same mission and unlocking? I listened to what you're creating and you're prioritizing everybody else and everybody else's journey. I have not heard once how this is about you. What is that about you? Where did you get that?
My grandmother, my mother who often went without so that my brother and I could have. I didn't realize that I lived in poverty. I knew we didn't have a lot, but I realized just how below the poverty line we lived when I went to college. And you have to fill out the financial aid forms. My mom made like $15,000 a year. This was in 1987. And I was president of student council on the homecoming court in high school. I went to Louisiana Girls State, the governor's prep. I did everything. My mother, Angela, I remember going to bed at night and, whatever it is that I was doing, it was going to cost money she didn't have. And she would often say, I don't have it. She would be gone to work by the time my brother and I would get up for school. And when I would get up to go to school, whatever it was, if it was $20 or $25 or $5, it would be laying on that table for me to be able to participate or do whatever it was that I wanted to do. When she often went without, I think that my mother showed me that it wasn't about her, but it was about creating an experience for me that would help me to be the best that I could possibly be. And it wasn't about the money. It was the sacrifice that was so much more valuable. And the lesson in that sacrifice that helps me to understand that who I am and what God has given me to do to elevate other people's dreams is not about me. It's not about me. I really want to be able to live the kind of life as an entrepreneur or as a leader, as a friend, as a daughter, as a sister. I want to live the kind of life where the angels brag about me in heaven. If people here didn't ever know my name, if they were bragging on me in heaven, then I feel like I would have done what I was put here to do. And my favorite quote says, it's by Benjamin Disraeli. He was a prime minister in Britain. And it says, the greatest good you can do for another is not just to share with him your riches, but to help reveal to him his own. So you didn't invite me to come on here to brag about what I've done, where I've been, who I've met, who I've seen. The idea is, how do I help by an experience of mine to unlock the club so that other people can have access to some of the same experiences that I've had, and maybe even more access as a result of something that, like those pearls of wisdom that you were dropping, you were dropping straight gems on the front end of this call. And when you were walking through kind of what your experiences have been, what you to me essentially are saying is that you don't have to run into the roadblocks that I ran into. Let me show you how to get around those. Let me show you how to get over, go under, go around those roadblocks, speed bumps, so that my failing forward becomes your open access to unlocking the door.
Yeah, gives you a soft landing. And thank you for sharing and being vulnerable and talking about your mother. And I wonder, what do you want your mother to know?
Shirley Caesar has a song. She is an incredible gospel singer. And she said that she has this song, for the 9 months I carried you, no charge. And she talks about the sacrifice that a mother makes. And a mother doesn't make the sacrifices that she makes because she wants anything from you. It was no charge. For the mentors like Co Stringer or Renee Brown or, a Judy Rose, the former athletic director at UNC Charlotte, or Stephanie Colbert, who I met when I was in law school, and I would laugh and tell her that I would always say to her that she isn't just my mentor, but she became kind of like my confidant. She became my advocate. She became all of those things. But you know what? There's never been one charge for anything they've offered for Sue Levin at Nike and Ray Pond at Nike and, Ann Donovan, who is the head coach of our team, for the Charlotte Sting that led us to the WNBA finals, for all of the things that those teachers that I mentioned. I never had to pay them back anything, and they never asked for reciprocity. The one thing that, like Velma Tribble, who I met, was a vice president at ACT when I was in law school, who mentored me. She said that, Feedy, I don't want anything back. I just want you to pay it forward. So what I would want my mom to know is that the sacrifice she made for me, I'm willing to make for my sister, my cousins, the other little girls who are in my community, and for other women who they may not get the shine, but the life that I lead is enough.
Is enough. That's beautiful, beautifully said and stated. And as I'm listening to you, so as this episode drops, it will be 51 weeks since my mother passed. And my mother was the inspiration for launching Unlocking the Club because, like you just shared about those stories about growing up where you just knew you had everything you needed, right? I found about that later on in life, like right where my mother was revealing some of those stories of being up late at night trying to balance the checkbook so that, right, my brothers and I could have cleats for t-ball or baseball, and that we could have money for the 2-day camp on the weekend that was coming up. And I had no idea, like, right, that all of these things were going on. And one of the inspirations for Unlocking the Club is we learned from that strength that they had, right? And sacrificing all that they wanted and needed in their dreams so that we could fulfill our own dreams. And there's so much in that journey that we can all learn from. And that is kind of that soft landing that you're talking about, being able to provide for people behind us, letting them know what our journey was like, both positive and negative, the failures as well as the successes, so that people don't have to learn it on their own. Right. And I think it's really important for us, particularly as Black women, to share these stories. But I, like you, I know for sure so much of the things that I have achieved were inspired by me wanting to show up in a way that my mom could be proud. To show up so that she knew all of those sacrifices that she made and my father made and our grandparents made, that they weren't in vain. And that's a big burden to carry to a certain extent. But I think it's not one that we carry alone. There's so many people, and it's so rewarding to know there's someone like you, Felicia, that's doing this work as well, not just for self, but for community. And I admire you for it. I applaud you for everything that you're doing. I encourage people to find out about the work that Felicia is doing. And the information will be on the screen here on YouTube. It'll be in our show notes for the podcast. But I want to go back, Felicia, to that dinner event that you had after Dawn won the championship. And you talked about how people shared their story, the ups and downs and what they were going through. How important is it for us to have that space? Because we can look at you, we can look at Dawn and say, everything is hunky-dory. It doesn't have a care in the world. But that is not the case. In order to get to the point to cut down those nets, in order to have Felicia Hall Allen and Associates, it wasn't easy. To be able to get that law degree, right? You had to overcome a lot. What is it that we need our listeners to know, as well as to know about all the successes?
That's a great question. I think that you said a moment ago, you said, for some that could feel like a burden. For others, it's a gift. And I think that it's the sense of community that I think helps to unlock the door. And the retreat that I was able to host, everything that we did was with intentionality. It takes time. Like a lot of times people want it to happen right now. It took time for Don to build a championship. It took time for Serena Williams to become who Serena Williams, and but we saw that in the movie. When I looked at The Woman King and, the level of sisterhood and the bond. So when you talk about kind of like the good old boys club, it's just the bond. What they do is they're intentional about the bonds that they create in the framework that they create, those bonds that kind of keep us on the outside looking in, whether that's their fraternities or their exclusive men's groups, and whether they meeting at the cigar club or they're on the golf course, but they have, and oftentimes it's in a social environment and or setting where they can bond. And I think that the way that we bond is a little bit different than the way that they do it, Angela. So the retreat, women, we like retreats. We like to, have a martini or a glass of wine, or, we want to do the Cupid shuffle. We want to talk about books that we read and, by way of book clubs. And it's a little bit more intimate. And I think that that's what I was trying to create, this intimate connection for women to feel like they were not alone, and to feel like we can celebrate each other, we can hug each other, and we can also share little tricks of the trade with each other in the way that they do. But it really also is about being in the club, is connectivity. It's about connection. It's about mentorship. It's about promotion. And it's about creating a space that we feel comfortable enough that we can trust each other to gain access to each other's hearts and dreams and goals. And then we could also think about how those goals, dreams, and objectives are intertwined and aligned, which then creates the opening, or it creates a clearing for us to be able to support each other where we can. But without the intentional connection, there is no space for collaboration, and there's no space for introductions, because for a lot of them, that was the first time they knew each other's names, but they didn't know each other's hearts. And I think that when those guys sit in that cigar bar and they start telling stories and having a glass of bourbon, they talk long enough that they get to hear the intentions of the other man. And then they start to think about how they can help him. And I think we have to create different frameworks and structures and environments, Angela, where we can talk long enough and engage and interact long enough that we can find out where the gaps are for each other in our dreams, that we're able to kind of create those connections and be intentional about it.
Yeah. And you create connection by being vulnerable, right? Of showing up fully and authentically. And I think so often, I know for me as a Black woman in the corporate space, you can be guarded. You can compartmentalize who you are because you have to protect yourself. And it's really important to find those spaces where you are intertwined and aligned, as Felicia just spoke to. If you have one, fantastic. If you don't have one, find one. If you can't find one, build one. Build a space where people can connect and learn and grow and share and support one another, because you see each other, you hear each other, and you care about one another in a powerful way. And that is what Felicia Hall Allen continues to do in all of her endeavors. And we will find out a little bit more about what those endeavors actually are here in a moment on Unlocking the Club, when we come back with Felicia Hall Allen on the Back Nine. Do you want to stop feeling like you have little to no control over your life's journey and instead amplify your life's purpose? You all know me as Angela Taylor, host of the Unlocking the Club podcast, but I am also a business, career, life, and leadership coach, helping my clients to live their best life. Every day, I help my clients discover what they truly want in life, and then unlock the club on how they can live their best life. If you're like many of my clients, you have found yourself over the years prioritizing everyone else and everything else. Your job, your significant other, your family, your friends, your community, the list goes on and on. Well, I'm here to tell you the best thing you can do for others is to invest in yourself. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to succumb to the fear of failure. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to feel like you're being selfish. You simply need to prioritize you. You may be thinking that coaching is for other people, but trust me when I say that we all could benefit from a good coaching relationship. Together, we'll build a plan to help you amplify your gifts, clarify your goals, and accelerate your journey toward the life you desire, which may be finding financial wealth, spiritual health, relationship success, and/or freedom and flexibility. You no longer have to feel like you aren't welcome into someone else's club. Let me empower you to leverage all of your extraordinary gifts and create your own club. Head on over to unlockingtheclub.com to book a free 20-minute introductory call to learn more about our Unlocking Your Journey coaching packages, or use code UNLOCK to get a 15% discount on the 6-month coaching package. Today is the day to invest in yourself. Let's unlock your journey. You know, we're back here on Unlocking the Club on the back nine with Felicia Hall Allen. And Felicia, as I'm listening to all the things that you were doing and creating for others, I wonder, as an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, a wife, like, how do you find time and balance for yourself?
First, I'd like to say that I love the back nine. That is so much fun. The back nine. I love it, Angela. My husband, Johnny, and I started playing golf together. And we would go over to Winthrop University and we would walk. It was a 9-hole course and we would walk it. And what was interesting for us was that became space for us to spend time together, talking, walking, and enjoying something together. We started taking dance lessons. My husband likes to dance. I like to dance. We started doing ballroom dancing, like Detroit ballroom dancing. Everybody knows about the Chicago stepping. We love being able to do things together. We work together. We do team building together and leadership development and diversity training together. And it just feels good to have a partner in crime who, and I guess it probably helps him. We were on vacation with a few couples in Hawaii a couple of months ago, and one of our friends, the guys had gone off to play golf, and we were all sitting around, and one of my girlfriends said, "You guys know what is about to happen. It's September 1st. We're about to be football widows." Yeah, the other wife and I, who were sitting there, we were like, we won't be widowed because we'll be right by their sides, cheering and having a good time. I think that at Nike, we have this thing: if you work hard, play hard, because God knows that every woman listening to this Unlocking the Club, you have to try to figure out which 21 hours you're going to work, and then which 3 you're going to sleep and do all of the other stuff you want to do, because it just never seems to be enough time in the day. And a friend of mine gave me a magnet, Sporty Gerald. He's a professor now at the University of South Carolina in their sports management department, but he used to run the Coliseum when the Charlotte Sting played there in the Hornets. When I started my business, he gave me a magnet and said, the best thing about being your own boss is you get to decide which 21 hours you're going to work each day. And so you talk about finding balance. My husband says, Johnny Allen says, I know nothing about balance. But what he also can acknowledge is that I am intentional about creating as many good times as I possibly can, and being a curator of memories with my family and friends, and entertaining Because when it's all said and done, nobody's going to ask me how many sports clients that I represent and, how many contracts that I help get signed and nobody's going to say all of that. When I often go to people's homegoing celebrations, they are remembering the experiences. And so my balance comes by way of an experience. And I don't know if that was the answer, but it's my answer.
It is. It's your answer. And I think that balance, we define balance ourselves, right? Because for some, like as an entrepreneur, the things that I'm doing, I love what I'm doing. It brings me joy to be in that moment. And there's other folks that like, right, I'm 9 to 5, and if I'm 9 to 5:30, I'm miserable. Like, right. So as long as you have joy and perspective in your life, and you know what that is, and you can operate with intentionality around it, I think that we can define balance in our own way. It's a mindset to me more than anything, for sure.
I love that. It's the perspective. It's the perspective around your purpose and how you want to be used. And I think that our time typically dictates what matters to
And
us.
sometimes, like, work feeds you, like it feeds your soul. Like I can hear for you, it feeds who you have been your entire life.
You said it though, when it's a part of who you are, it never feels like work. It never feels, you've heard the saying, if you love what you do and do what you love, you never have to work a day in your life. Right now, I don't feel like I work. I just feel like I walk in purpose. Like, and what I love when you can be an entrepreneur, isn't every
It
day a
is.
different day?
Every
Like
moment.
you don't have to go and stand on a line and build and create widgets.
Exactly.
Like that's fun to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm curious, since you were born a Dallas Cowboy, and as am I, how are you doing with our Cowboys right now? Like, I don't want to jinx it, so I'm gonna knock on wood right now, but
I got this song, Kyra Elsie, who won the SEC championship last year at the University of Kentucky, who's a client of mine. Her husband, Dexter, is a Cowboy. He sent me this thing on Instagram, and I send it to all of the Cowboy haters, and it says, ain't nobody calling me, paging me, texting me, asking me if we steal them boys. We steal them boys. And I like love that. I'm like, I love this because I am all about the star. Johnny is like anything but the Cowboys. And I say, baby, it's okay because we're America's team and it's all about that star. And at the end of the day, isn't that what everybody is pursuing in America? We love stars. That's why it's in our
exactly. And you know
flag.
what I say all the time in a lot of different settings, losers worry about winners, winners worry about winning. Everybody's always worried about the Cowboys, like, right? And I know we haven't won in over 2 decades, but we are just constantly, as Cowboys fans, worried about winning. But when I think about, Felicia, you talk about you and Johnny walking the golf course, or the different domains where you feel like you have balance. I'm wondering, beside your own
Mhm.
home, what's the place where you feel safest to be yourself?
That's a great question. Probably church. Church is where I think that I can be most vulnerable. Most vulnerable. I'm not concerned about what anybody around me is doing. I'm just wanting to connect this way so that it makes it easier for me to connect this way. So if I'm connecting here, it's easier to connect here. And so, you think about the music, and Elevation Church has great music, and we're doing these elevation worship experiences and pop ups all over the place. But I grew up like Church of God in Christ, and they laugh and say, you can't join it. You got to be born in it. It's the Church of God in Christ. But that was one of the gifts that on both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side, those grandparents, I think that that connection to Christ was probably the best gift that they introduced me to and or gave me. My grandmother had a song that said, falling in love with Jesus was the best thing I've ever done. I think that it is in that time where I know that no matter when I call, when I pray, he's never too busy. I love that space. That think about it. You are often through unlocking the club, you're feeding other people, right? When you go to church, you're being fed. So it's the one time when you don't have to be anything for anybody. just open to receive whatever it is that God is choosing to give you. And it doesn't always have to come from the pulpit. It could come from a song that was sang. It could come from an usher. It could come from a hug, from, when they say greet 7 people around you, you just, that is a safe and warm space for me that just, it gives me joy.
Well, as you were in that safe and warm space, and have that perspective about those situations or circumstances where you enter into with trepidation, what are those circumstances and how do you confront that or overcome that trepidation?
When I feel fear or anxiety, or you mean that?
Hesitancy, whatever shows up for you that you have a little bit of trepidation every time.
How do I move through that, you mean?
Yeah. What is the circumstance and how do you move through it?
I think the circumstance is often probably like the imposter syndrome. Like I've shared with you all kind of like where I'm from.
Yeah.
So it's the thought that I don't belong. Like, do I belong here? Do I belong at this table? I was invited to be a commissioner for the healthcare system in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And this wasn't when I was, a team executive for the WNBA. This was with my name, CEO of Felicia Hall Allen and Associates. The average age of those who serve as county commissioners for the healthcare was, I think, 60, white male.
Yes.
And here I was, not 50, in my 40s. And certainly I don't have the look. And most of the other people on that board, their names are on buildings.
Yeah.
They have operated in that C-suite, and they have a ton of respect in this community, some inherited and some that they work for. And then I remember, Angela, so thinking about going into those meetings and those settings where these are some of the most powerful people in our community. And then I ask myself, what's my why for sitting at the table? And I start to gain clarity. So how do I get through it? I go back to my why. My why is what my civics teacher said. And my why is to be the voice for those people who would not otherwise have a voice at that table.
Yes.
And if I don't speak up, then who's advocating on their behalf? Yes. So I don't have to be an imposter, because all I have to do is remember why I'm here, or why I'm there, or why God placed me in whatever space He has allowed me to have access to.
It sounds like, right, that trepidation is a reminder to pause for a moment. And I know you've talked about this when you speak, right? Is like silence and that pause and how powerful it could be. But to pause and remind yourself of your why. It's okay to be fearful, hesitant, all of those different things, but remind yourself of why you're in that room and in that space. And as you were speaking, Felicia, I remember earlier on today when you were talking about the 2 examples, those rooms that you walked into, whether it was all men, right, at Nike, or those rooms with all women, people that didn't look like you. And you said, just in passing, who had perceived power. And I was like, note to myself, that was a really important perceived power, because oftentimes we do look at these boards and these settings with people with titles and all these different things that have perceived power. But what they don't have is what you bring to the table. And so important for you to know that and to own it fully is that they do not have your lived experience, your perspective, your expertise. And it is incumbent upon you to bring that to the table to advocate for everybody else. So I love that that's how you show up.
That's so good. That's unlocking the club. I like that, because it really is about authenticity. It is about not being afraid to be authentically who you are, and not being afraid for people to really see you and to hear you when you have something to say that could be of value and or benefit to someone else. or something else. I love Angela. That was so good.
No, and just knowing that you are enough. You are enough.
Mhm.
And so Felicia, when you know you're enough, what is that superpower? What is your superpower? And I think we've talked about it a little bit, but what is your superpower?
That's a great question. I think my superpower is my voice.
Mm.
I think my superpower is it's my blessing. Johnny says your voice sometimes is a curse and a blessing. You don't realize that there's so much power in what you say, and people hold on to your words. So you have to be careful how you use them, because they can either build someone up or they can totally dismantle them. My voice, in that I look at, when George Floyd was murdered, and you were in Minneapolis for many years as a WNBA executive there. But I look at how someone who was perceived to have very little significance in the world, and how that what was perceived to be an insignificant life generated, curated a movement that we have not seen in ages. And I think that it is that for me, that I will not allow anyone to make me feel insignificant. That also an understanding that my significance has nothing to do with their perception, but it's who I believe I am and what I believe I have to give and offer, that unlocks the door to any club that I might ever want to be a part of. I can't give someone else the sort of power that would ever diminish my light. I own that light. So it's kind of like you talk about, you brought the sunshine. You brought the sunshine, Angela. You brought that.
Yeah.
Nobody gave you that. You brought that. It's a choice. It's a decision. It's an attitude. It's the way we show up.
The way we show up. That is your superpower. And your voice
That's my
is your
superpower.
superpower. And it continues to be. And again, grateful that you recognize that and have recognized it since you were a little girl before you went to Iowa. That is your superpower.
I'm going to show up light now. I'm going to show up. You know how you used to sing in Vacation Bible School, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Absolutely.
I think that God gave me that.
God gave it to you for sure. Well, and you talked about George Floyd and the impact that he had under horrendous circumstances, unfortunately, right? But when you think about the world that we live in and the spaces that you navigate, what are some of the stories that you think need to be told?
That there is still room for first. Kamala Harris becoming the first woman of color to be the vice president of these United States of America. President Barack Obama becoming the first Black man to serve as president of these United States of America. When I think about the first, Serena Williams and Venus and what they've done, and when I think of Simone Biles and what she did and the number of gold, like when I think about LeBron James, and in terms of the first, and first, like King James, the whole high school phenom, and then the work that he's done beyond the basketball court and the opportunities that he created. When I just think about people who are not afraid to walk in their power and purpose and to take risk on their dream, just to believe in the beauty of the dream. There's still space to believe in the beauty of your dream, and understanding that the color of your skin does not diminish what's possible. And it takes me back to my understanding that in high school at Louisiana Girls State, and I was an 11th grader. We were at LSU. It was about 300 girls, 300 boys, girls state, boys state, and we learned about the political system. And I remember that I ran for attorney general in my party. And there might have been, out of 300 girls, 20 Black girls. Out of 300 girls, 20 Black girls from across the state of Louisiana. And I remember it was my turn to get ready to give my speech, use my voice. And I said to the girls we have parishes and not counties in Louisiana. And you have to be able to get votes, kind of like in the political system now. The person with the most votes, that's the person who advances to represent their party. We were like Nats and Feds, the nationalists, the federalists. But I remember saying to the girls in my group, I said, because they were saying, I think you're our best shot at winning. I said, I'm not going to win. And they said, why? I said, can't you count in this room? They're not enough. I'm not going to win. And they said, Felicia, you're going to win. You're the best at this. And Angela, it might have been 10:30 at night. We had been in sessions all day. My group was probably one of the last groups. I think the governor speech was probably last. Not only did I win, it was like a landslide. The next closest person might have had 20 votes. Like, it was the first time that I acknowledged within myself, one, that I was afraid that I couldn't have something, do something, or be something because of the color of my skin, that it would not allow me to have access. But two, for other young women who, like I said, didn't look like me, but they validated me. People don't always have to look like you to be the ones to validate you and affirm you. And then for those girls in that room to choose quality and content, and whatever we were saying was just stuff we were making up, but whatever the delivery was, it was enough to draw them in. And we didn't have to politic and or negotiate. That was one of the few races that night where there was no politicking and negotiating. I just flat out won. And that's why I say there's still time, because the color of our skin doesn't have to diminish the doors that can be unlocked for us. And I think that's why I believe in, I'm a founding member of the Advancement of Blacks in Sports. It's about racial, social, and economic justice, because it's not just enough for us to pursue social justice if economically we can't figure out how to survive, but then also how to take what we have to thrive in the communities where we are. If we're good enough on the field to win championships, then why are we not good enough to provide services for those organizations and entities that are creating this entertainment opportunity where we are the belle of the ball? We are the king of the court or the field. And I think that I'm excited because we're still creating history. And there's so many women out there, or young girls or men or boys out there who can still dream big dreams, because the door to the club doesn't have to keep you out if you're willing to unlock it.
Yes, yes, amen. I absolutely love that story for so many reasons, Felicia. There's still more room for firsts.
Mm-hmm.
And the systems and society may tell you otherwise. But again, trust yourself and lean in. And in that example that Felicia shared from Girl State, right, there's a couple different things. Like, sometimes we look at success only in the outcome, but success happens in the process. And in the process, you were able to win over so many people that eventually voted for you. But even if they didn't, they knew who you were and how you showed up, and the impact that you had on them as you showed up was incredibly important. I think the other thing is, inside of all of those moments, sometimes we could choose to not, right? Because of that fear.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many things that happen when you are just willing to try and being willing to fail or to lose, right? But just simply being willing to try. So thank you for sharing that story with us, because there are still so many opportunities for firsts. And I would say, and I'm sure that you might have a similar experience, we both were executives in the WNBA right around the same time. And there weren't very many of us who looked like you or I that were
Mhm.
running teams. And it felt like a burden, right? Because you didn't want to be the last to be
Mm-mm.
able to be invited to run a team. And I think it's so important that you let people know, like if you were carrying that burden by yourself of being the first or the only, it could be incredibly lonely. But there's other people that have similar experiences that you can connect with, that you can share with. And if you take that burden on all by yourself, it could be debilitating.
Thank you for what you're doing and unlocking the club, because I think that what this podcast is doing is providing pearls, gems of wisdom from women who've done it and who are willing to share some of those gems and pearls to help others unlock the door to the club. It's not a situation where it's an invite only. This isn't an invite only. The invitation is extended to anyone who'd like to have access into the club that either you create, co-create, curate, or you decide to join. But the invitation is yours. The question is, do you accept?
Do you accept? Do you accept? Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Because that is the goal for this, is for us all to see ourselves in places that maybe we didn't before because of the system and all the messages that the system tells us. But if we can hear it from others and know that it's not always pretty, but it's possible for us to happen. And you are making that possible for so many people in your stratosphere by the work that you're doing. And so I would love for you to share with our audience, where can they find you and what are some of the amazing projects that you're working on?
Thank you for that opening. Felicia Hall Allen and Associates, you all can find me. I think that my business is my name because there's no greater value for me than the credibility that I've been able to create by the experiences and or the gifts and skills that I bring to the table. So I am now working as a consultant with the HBCU All-Stars. You can go to hbcuallstars.com. Travis Williams, who was a head coach at two HBCUs, Fort Valley and Tennessee State, started an HBCU All-Star game that CBS is televising. Last year was the first year. It was televised on the in-between day at the men's Final Four. So Black student athletes were invited to the Final Four, and CBS created a national platform for them to be seen, and NCAA corporate partners, some of them got behind this initiative. And I'm working with Travis as a business consultant, and that is a joy for me to help create that opportunity and the exposure and visibility and spotlighting HBCUs. Johnny and I host a professional development symposium for college coaches, a step up. We took a couple of years off. You know why.
I know, COVID.
It was a pandemic. We did it virtually, but this year we'll be coming back in May 22nd through the 24th in Charlotte, the Queen City. We have an assistant coaches symposium just for curious learners, current and future generations of coaches who just want to be the best at what they do. We have a next level symposium for coaches who want to be head coaches. And, you have to have 6-7 years of assistant coaching experience at the collegiate level. And last year, I think virtually, a year ago, we brought in like about 40 decision makers, 20 executive search firm representatives, and
Wow.
we had to think about 25 college administrators who were a part of it, and it was exceptional. And we do a head coaches executive leadership academy because they're always looking for the edge. What head coaches are looking for, that competitive edge, and it's been exceptional. We'll be in Charlotte this year. You can go to stepuplive.com if you'd like to know more. stepuplive.com, hbcuallstars.com. You can also follow A Step Up on Twitter at A Step Up AFHA, A Step Up FHA. You can follow me, Felicia Hall Allen, on Twitter at F Hall Allen. It's just that simple. Everything, I guess, has my name involved in it. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about, Angela, is I think I mentioned I'm serving on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Healthcare Authority Board, and we've been talking a lot about health equity, and that has been at the forefront for me. I recently attended, symposium of sorts for Black board of directors, members from all across the country in the healthcare at Morehouse College in Atlanta.
Wow.
We had a chance to see 3 living Black female surgeon generals sitting on the stage.
What?
And it was mind blowing. I mean, like, it was the best, the absolute best. And so
talk about firsts.
And to hear their stories, and they wanted to make sure they were not going to be the last. And so the work that I'm doing now is really about elevating dreams and elevating hope, both professionally as well as around health equity. And I'm having a lot of fun just doing that. And Johnny and I continue to do team buildings, and we do team buildings with everybody from annually. We go out to UCLA where Corey Close, her team's ranked in the top 20 right now. And we work with Dawn's team at South Carolina, and they're ranked number 1 right now. But we also work with HBCUs and their conference offices, and still doing work with the NFL. So my plate is pretty full, and I am loving every minute of it. And I have to shout out ABIS, the Advancement of Blacks in Sports. You can, like, our hashtag is "Do You See What We See?" And I think that the website is weareabis.com.
That's amazing. So you were filling all 21 hours a day that you were leading in. But you know what? You were walking in your purpose, and Marie Jones Williams, I believe was your grandmother's name.
Yes.
Would be incredibly proud. And those angels are looking down on you and saying, go girl, keep doing what you're doing, keep having that impact. Everything that you're doing matters. And I know being in the sports space, appreciates, Felicia, the work that you and Johnny are doing. Thank you for showing up, standing up, and speaking up for the next generation of leaders that we'll see in sports. And we're right on the cusp. The season is starting. So when this episode is dropping, the men's and women's basketball season will be well underway. Looking forward to watching so many of your clients.
We got a lot of good basketball. I'm excited for Joni Taylor, who is in the $1 Million Club at Texas A&M now, who I'm very proud of the work that Joni's doing. Satia Messer, who is a national champion. She was with Kim Mulkey at Baylor and then went to LSU. Second time head coach. She's at Central Florida. It absolutely is fun to watch all of them. And this is going to be such an exciting season for women's basketball. So get ready, everybody. Get ready, buckle up. We are about to do this, baby.
All right. Well, Felicia Hall Allen, thank you so much for joining us on an episode of Unlocking the Club. Again, appreciate all the work that you're doing and appreciate the stories that you shared with our audience today.
Thank you for having me, Angela. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Wow, another great conversation with Felicia Hall Allen about walking in purpose. So many things that resonated with me about the conversation, her journey from a little girl in Louisiana to playing basketball for the legendary coach C. Vivian Stringer at the University of Iowa, where she also got her law degree, and then has gone on to do so many amazing things through her organization. So if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you check the crawl at the bottom of the screen. You'll find out where you can find Felicia on social media and the websites that she mentioned. If you're listening to this podcast on any of our podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Podcasts. Make sure you check out the show notes and you'll find out where you can find more information about the great work that Felicia Hall Allen is doing under Felicia Hall and Allen and Associates. For another episode of Unlocking the Club, I'm your host, Angela Taylor. It has been a pleasure being in conversation with these unique voices and powerful stories that we're listening to and learning from. Thank you all for joining me for another episode. Again, if you want to continue the conversation, make sure you head on over to Facebook and the Code Breakers Lounge, where we'll continue this discussion. We have some Ask Me Anything sessions coming up with some previous guests. And then I'm going to be doing a little bit of the rewind and talking about some of the episodes that many of you asked about, my thoughts on what some of the guests shared on our previous episodes. So follow us on social media at Unlocking the Club. Head over to Facebook and the Code Breakers Lounge and stay tuned for more from Unlocking the Club. Again, for my team at Unlocking the Club, I'm your host, Angela Taylor. And until the next episode, be well.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.